It's time for Weekend Review, where Comic Book Man looks back, usually with regret.
What are we going to do for entertainment? I don't know. We could start breathing gas fumes.
My uncle says that smoking crack is kind of cool.
Hey, why don't we go watch some of those porno movie thingies? Cool!
It's time for Weekend Review for February 2nd, 2011. The Outhouse Perspective. Yeah, it's a little backwards. It's also the first part of two. So without further ado, here's Comic Book Man.
Hey folks, Comic Book Man here. Welcome once again to my video Outhouse. It's time for Weekend Review! And this is the Weekend Review for February the 2nd, 2011. This is your moment where we take out time to look back at the week that just was. As we did last week, we're going to break Weekend Review into two parts. First part is going to be shipping, where I'm going to talk about these wonderful books here, which shipped this week. Second part of Weekend Review will be where I go over some of the news that happened this week. So be sure to check out part 2 for the news. But right now, we're going to talk about the shipping for this week. And leading off this week was my book of the week for the week, DC Comics' DC Universe Legends #1, which shipped this week. This is a bi-weekly comics coming out once every 2 weeks for 26 issues, half a year long, not a full year. But it'll take a year to finally come out. Based on the role-playing online game, which apparently is doing huge business for DC and online gamers. I don't do any online gaming. All I've ever seen of this is the video that they debuted last year at San Diego Con, which has been seen umpteen million times on Facebook and on YouTube and on the internet, of all the villains and the heroes fighting each other, and then Superman comes back and he gets killed, and then you find out at the end of the video that it's all sort of told in flashback because the Luthor from the future is telling the heroes from the past, this is what's going to happen, stop me before I wind up destroying the Earth. Well, this comic picks up sort of kind of from that point. You see all the things that happen. If you've seen the previews, it's been in the back of the DC Comics. About half of this book is those previews, so you've seen that already. The other half of the book shows what happens when Brainiac shows up. Okay, Luthor gets out of town, he escapes, and he manages to bring together all the heroes that are left still alive on the Earth, who are all in pretty bad shape, but all the heroes that are still left together for like the last Justice League. And he manages to put them all together. They also show him talking a little bit to the heroes in the past in this thing. So the way this is set up is Luthor from the present, in the future, is going to have his new Justice League fighting Brainiac, and of course the heroes from the past are also going to be working to try to stop Luthor from teaming up with Brainiac. And there you go. Anyway, this came out this week, and it sold pretty well. Also this week, we had Brightest Day. Now, I haven't been covering much in Brightest Day because, like Justice League Lost Generation, the storyline's been plodding along and plodding along. This is actually plotting much better than I think the Justice League book is. But the reason I'm bringing this out is Aqua War starts in this issue. This is essentially the big Aquaman story arc. And Mira's people, who are from another dimension, are on Earth, and they invade Florida, and they're starting an Aqua War. And this comes under the heading of spoilers, kids. So if you don't want to have a spoiler ending given away,
Run screaming out of the room
out of the room. But the one thing happens to Aquaman that you sort of kind of knew was going to happen at some point. I'm just surprised it's this soon. And of course, it's this. Oh, surprise! I hope it doesn't mean he's going to grow a beard and start going bare chested.
We need to get that on some ice right now.
About time he got that hand hacked off. Somebody get that claw ready.
We need that trident.
But anyway, this shipped this week. He got his hand cut off this week. They also explained a lot of the plot in this week. As to why the White Lantern is doing what it's doing, and why Hawkman and Hawkgirl were killed in the last issue. And if you haven't picked that up by now, well, it's not a spoiler. You should have picked it up. It came out 2 weeks ago.
No apology.
And besides, it's not like they're dead. You know, yeah, they brought them back to kill them. You're never, ever going to see Hawkman and Hawkgirl ever again. But they give away a lot of the plot points in this thing. Finally, as issue 19 out of 26, they're finally getting up to it. So this is actually a pretty important issue to pick up if you've been following Brightest Day. Whoop, hey, there's the back cover. Also this week, we had the Superman 80-page giant, which is like the Batman 80-page giant that came out about 2 months ago. It's a bunch of brand new stories, no reprints. It's a whole bunch of brand new stories by a bunch of different creative people, folks who don't normally work on Superman. There's a cute Bizarro story in here. There's also a Mad Hatter story in here. Yeah, Mad Hatter. He's a Batman villain, I know. There's a Mad Hatter story in here. And a Supergirl story in here. And you know what? It's a pretty good book. I didn't read all the stories. I read a couple of stories, and it's a good book. It's a mixed bag, like the Batman one. They all weren't winners in the Batman book either, but there are a lot of good stories in there, and I think it's well worth the $5.99 price point that they slapped on this sucker. Also this week was 40% off last Wednesday here at the store. Legion of Superheroes Annual number 1. This is the reteaming of the Levitz and Giffen team, which of course made a big name for themselves back in the mid 80s on Legion of Superheroes, and then they rebooted the book. Giffen did, in that miserable future dystopian Legion where they were all adults and the world was shot to hell. But they're reteamed here for the very first time, the two of them together, since those days. Giffen's art on this thing is Giffen's always been an acquired taste. I've never liked his art all that much. He's always had a strong Kirby influence. If you like Jack Kirby, pick this up because this is heavily influenced by Jack Kirby.
Oh, you think?
As far as the art goes, yeah.
It looks right out of Kirby's
book. It's heavily influenced by Jack Kirby, but and I'm saying that as a positive thing, not as a negative thing. But the story I haven't read. I just flipped through it because like I said, Giffen's work never did all that much for me. But I like the fact that there's so much homage work done here to Jack Kirby in this thing. So it was interesting for that. And you had the last issue of Time Masters, Vanishing Point, which shipped this week, where you find out finally how Batman disappearing ties in with this storyline, and this whole thing is nothing but a catalyst to Flashpoint. A whole bunch of stuff happens at the end of this, which is supposed to kick into Flashpoint, and the next issue of Booster Gold, and a lot of reveals in here, which I'm not going to give away, but a lot of it has to do with Booster Gold's parents and future kids. Also this week, Marvel did ship books. Yes, they did. Marvel shipped books, and they shipped this Deadpool Cable number 26, as everybody may remember. Deadpool and Cable once upon a time were teammates. They ran together. They had their own book together. And this is Deadpool going to Cable's funeral. It's very sad. And
Cable's not dead.
And talking and coming up with a brilliant idea of how to pay homage to his former partner.
But it involves killing a lot of things.
You betcha. This came out this week. This is a .1 story, Iron Man 500.1. This is a jumping on point. All the .1 books are jumping on points. This is basically a great big old recap of Iron Man's life. Tony Stark sits in here and he reminisces about the time he was drunk, the time he was out of the costume, the time he built War Machine. He talks a little bit about the Transformers age for Iron Man. He also talks about when he first met the Avengers, and when he wore the gray armor, and those problems with Stain. And it's a jumping on point. It's a recap point. It's a running in place point. If you've never read an Iron Man comic, this is the one you want to pick up. This is an inventory story that Marvel published this month. They've got a bunch of inventory stuff that they're going to flush out the door. We've covered this before in Marvel News here on the Outhouse with Bo. This cover is much nicer than the interior art, and that's as far as I'm going to go with that. Marvel cranked out yet another Stephen King Stand miniseries starting this week. This is number 1 of 5 for No Man's Land, The Stand. And finally, the last issue of Savage She-Hulk, or She-Hulks, or whatever this is, shipped this week as well. And so that's over with too. Oh, before I get out of here, Thor, First Thunder, Last Thunder, For Asgard, whatever this is, For Asgard. The title's covered up. Shipped this week. This wraps up this mini-series. So the trade paperback will be out in a week or two. Indies, Dynamite. Last week, this was 40% off as well. I mentioned this. Kato fights Godzilla. It's not really that. It is, but it isn't that. Kato fights a guy in a giant Godzilla monster suit. If you know your Japanese monsters at all and your American monsters, the suit makes the guy about as big as the original King Kong, the 1933 version, who was much smaller than Toho's Godzilla, who's like 35 stories tall. He's about 18 to 20 feet tall in this thing, which is big, but it's an exoskeleton suit, and they goes through New Century City, and he causes some havoc. So this is much easier for Kato to deal with than a 35-story tall giant robot monster. But anyway, that came with 2 covers this week. The cover with Kato jumping and the cover with Kato eating a pizza with the giant monster in it. Also this week from Dynamite, we had The Warriors, number 5. This wraps up the Warriors miniseries, the official movie adaptation of this movie that came out back in 80, 81, 82, I think. I forget when it came out. It almost took as long to get this miniseries out as it took for the movie to come out 30 years ago. The first issue of this book shipped on February the 18th, 2009. That's right, a 5-issue miniseries that took 2 years to come out. I hope you Warrior fans are happy, and I hope it was worth it. Dynamite, or whoever did this, should be kicked in the ass around the block for an hour and a half. 5 issues, 2 years. Also this week from Dynamite, H2O, which looks for all the world like a contractual obligation book. This is a science fiction story set in the future where water is become scarce and a valuable commodity, and thus the title H2O. I have no idea why this thing was done or why it was put together. It smacks of contractual obligation, though, somewhere along the line by somebody. I'm not saying it's not bad. I haven't read it, but it came out this week. Oh, and it has a $8.99 cover price. Oh, $8.99? Comic book names these glasses. $8 or $6.99. I can't read it. But it came out this week, and it's square bound. Infestation over in the IDW universe. Infestation Transformers #1 of 2 came out this week in 2 glorious covers. Continuing the Infestation event over at IDW. All of the Infestation first issues are going to be 40% off here at Alternate Reality. Star Trek is coming in this coming week. It's 40% off here at the store. When G.I. Joe comes out, it'll be 40% off, as will Ghostbusters. And then when we wrap this thing up, I'll probably do 40% off on the last issue, too. From Image, Daiomu Shipped, which is a manga-inspired comic from Image, and I know nothing about this. But the art is painterly, so if you like painted books, you might want to check this out. The whole book is painted. Bomb Queen came out. This is a piece of trash, folks. This really is. I don't normally say that about comic books. I'm not in the reviewing business, Sweet Dan Sweet is, but this is just a piece of trash. Why is this a piece of trash? Well, the entire series has been about Bomb Queen and President Obama and him getting into all sorts of trouble with her. But when I was flipping through this the other day, this is Obama at the end of the series in a press conference. He's missing an arm, he's on crutches, his eye's been gouged out, and he's having a press conference. I don't care whether you love the president or hate the president. I don't care whether it's Obama or Reagan. This is not how you ought to be portraying the President of the United States. I'm sorry. If it was Ronald Reagan, I'd feel the same way, and I didn't have a lot of use for Ronald Reagan, and I'm not getting into politics here, but, I have no interest in seeing this. I have no interest in seeing the President of the United States being turned into a crash test dummy and kicked around the block. I'm sorry. I grew up during the Kennedy assassination. I know what that stuff's like. It's not a place you want to go. Anyway, that came out this week. On the lighter side, Crossed Family Values wrapped up this week.
We leave it up to you at the store, you want it or not.
Crossed Family Values came out this week with a whole bunch of lovely... Oh, Sarah loved this cover. If you take a real close look as to where the flag is going at the bottom of the pole, you'll see that it's just an absolutely lovely crossed cover. Bringing us back to the wonderful days of Iwo Jima in World War II and our brave soldiers who planted the flag there. And, of course, you also had this wonderful cover on Crossed Family Values as well. Anyway, this miniseries wraps up. There's another one warming up in the bullpen for Family Values. And finally, I want to stop off at Kids Corner before we get out of here because it was a big week for Kids Corner. This I mentioned last week in Kids Corner was going to be the kids' book of the week, but I didn't pick it, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But Uncle Scrooge number 400 shipped this week, an anniversary issue. 400 is a big deal for any comic. This shipped with 2 covers, okay, a painted cover. That's a virgin cover, which means it doesn't have any text or anything on it. That's this one. And this one, which is a wraparound cover, which is pretty cool. I like this cover. This is a really neat cover. The painterly one was nice too. I believe the painted one's a Barks cover, Carl Barks. But this is a nice cover too. Also, in the Kids Corner for this week, we also had, get my life back together here, the book of the week, which was Superhero Squad Spectacular, which is retelling of Secret Wars. Superhero Squad goes to the Secret Wars in one issue and one issue only. Marvel ought to do all their books like that. Of course, you had the second part of Archie and Sarah Palin go to Riverdale, which is just goofy fun, as opposed to the Bomb Queen stuff. This is just goofy fun. Okay, this is the second part of this. And the folks from Buy Me Toys did Oz Wonderland Kids. They do an Oz Wonderland more adult book where Alice in Wonderland and the Wizard of Oz folks meet up with each other and team up. This is a kids version book of that. I'd be much more impressed with this if it would come out on a regular basis along with the other Oz Wonderland book instead of a book every 2.5 to 3 years whenever the hell they feel like it. And that's it for shipping for this week. Part 2, we're going to talk about the big events for the past week. And of course, the big event that happened this week. The one event that was bigger than everything else, that overshadowed everything else in media and wrestling and comics, the one event was Snowpocalypse!
Look for part 2 of Week in Review for February 2nd, 2011. The Video Outhouse is brought to you by some of the finest people willing to work for free. This is a list of some of them.